You're welcome, Lynn.
Also, a reminder everyone that we're being recorded. So that's gone live since it's 7 o'clock. I just wanted to let you know on YouTube and then on WebEx also.
Thank you, Lisa.
And also my weekly reminder to make sure you're on mute unless you're talking so that the audio works. Thanks.
Are we just all being quiet, waiting for somebody, or is there a problem with the sound?
No problem. We were just trying to do like a reverse congratulations or surprise to you, but didn't work out.
Great
Didn't
job.
work out, Dennis. I'm sorry. Well, it's 1 minute to 7:05, and I think maybe it's a good time to get started. As I mentioned, the supervisor should be joining us shortly, but did give us the go ahead to get started. And like Lisa said, we are recording. So I'm going to share my screen as best I can to put up the agenda for tonight. All right, so hopefully everyone can see this. So welcome everyone again for another task force meeting. And I hope everyone had a wonderful 4th of July holiday weekend and got to enjoy it. I know I did. So I guess we can get started and go to updates. So hopefully everyone can see the screen. I think John Mooney, did you have an update for transportation tonight?
I do, Jose. Thank you. So immediately after this meeting, I will be distributing for your consideration and action on July 12th several documents so that the board can wrap up as, quote, substantially complete the transportation chapter. So there will be a red line copy. Unfortunately, it had to be delivered in the 2 sections in which it was written because I learned by sad experience, if you try to combine them, whatever the receiving document is, it completely changes, it substantially affects the formatting of the document that's being absorbed. So had to be put forward in 2 sections, namely transportation management and the balance of the chapter. There's also a clean copy of the entire proposed draft. And when I say it's the we believe it's the substantially complete draft, that recognizes that further editing is going to be necessary. So we will not be talking about tightening up texts and doing punctuation and stuff like that on the 12th. Very importantly, a fourth document is a transportation chapter decision issues list, which lists the 8 key issues that we, Jennifer, Bill Penniman, Gary Malpin, and I, in our conversations over the last couple months, believe need resolution in order to wrap the chapter up. So my recommendation is you start reading with that issues list. And you'll note that those 8 issues are tied to 8 yellow highlighted phrases or sections in the clean copy. So if you follow that decisions list, that will be your best single preparation for the meeting. Does that make sense? I think it will be clear when I send it out to you all. And finally, we are recommending that the issues still requiring resolution be handled by the full task force without another preliminary meeting of the Transportation Connectivity Working Group. That will save everybody time, and also the issues to be resolved are relatively few and pretty clearly delineated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you. And so you're going to send out those documents
Yes.
sometime this week.
Indeed, perhaps even tonight.
Okay. And any questions for John? And I can't see everyone, so feel free to unmute.
Either tonight or tomorrow, let's say, or
Okay.
very early tomorrow morning.
Understood. Okay, hearing no questions, I think we're okay. Thank you, John, for all the hard work you've done on the transportation chapter and recommendations
A bunch of folks have worked very hard on this.
Yeah. Yes, thank you so much, John. I try and look at my panelist list. I don't see Jennifer on to do Parks and Rec, and we can come back to that one. Tammy, energy and environment. I know Bill is out of town. Did you want to provide an update?
Sure. We have had meetings last week, several for both stormwater management and forestry, and received some very good information. Bill has done another iteration of his stormwater management, and that is not ready for prime time yet. He sent it to me today. He's gone for the week. And then I am working on the tree plan. So there will be a Reston tree plan. Very interesting information from foresters, and I have more research on that to do, but we're moving right along on that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Tammy. Okay. Yeah, I don't see Michelle on for equity and community health. Tammy, did you want to provide a quick update on public art? I know we sent out something.
Yeah, you sent out today. That is a really, really short chapter. It's not even a full page. Today I made a couple of changes in punctuation, bolded something, and changed some verbs from should to will. That's very few. I think there were 4 adjustments there. Please look that over. I know we've got a very full agenda tonight, so please look that over. It's really short, and I'd like to vote on that next time.
Thank you, Tammy. Any questions for Tammy on both energy and environment and public art? Please feel free to unmute. I can't see all the hands, so.
There are none.
Okay. Thank you, Tammy. Public facilities, Charles Colby. I know that you had provided an update last time, and I know we traded a couple emails earlier today.
Yep, nothing much to update. I'm just waiting to get in touch with critical people to give input.
Thank you, Charles. Any questions or comments for Charles Colby? Okay, well, we'll circle back with Parks and Rec. I saw through the chat, David Vanell, I know you wanted to provide some information on housing. David?
Yeah, thanks, Jose. Just a very quick thing, because the affordable housing people are going to want to speak a lot. Anyway, I got comments based upon what I sent out. I got comments from John Carter, Bill Penniman, Mark Looney, and Lynn. And so I would urge the rest of you to please weigh in here. And, whenever Walter and Jose decide to put this this document or whatever you call it, note-taking thing on the agenda to discuss in detail, they can do that. Just a couple of things. I want to make sure that what we're talking about, what I want to see in the final document, whatever that looks like, I think we can, based upon what I'm finding in the housing dashboard, I think we can get some figures and numbers for how many new homes in Reston, how many moderate income renters are paying more than a third, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to make sure we've got that. I want to make sure we emphasize why affordable housing is important. I want to make sure we talk about in detail about new production, about preservation, about land use policies and regulations, public-private partnerships, land trusts, if that's appropriate, so that and also maybe a special Reston WDU policy, just to make sure that we kind of beef up what I've seen in the now dated comprehensive plan. So that's all I've got.
Thank you, David. Any questions or comments? I know part of the agenda, we have
Yes,
staff. Yeah, Tammy.
Jose, I'd like to maybe reserve any comment until after we hear from ADUWD on the affordable housing, if you don't mind.
Yeah, happy to.
Thank you.
I saw that, and I think I saw that Jennifer had joined on. Jennifer, did you want to provide a quick update on parks and open space? I know this small group met last week.
Yeah, sorry guys, I was on another meeting, and I need to bring up my document to give my updates, which I did not expect to be on this meeting. So I just need a minute here.
Did you need the presenter role, Jennifer, as well?
No, I can
Okay.
easily go over this one just in verbiage. So we had a discussion list that we brought up, as I was telling everyone last meeting, and we had made it a little over half past that discussion topic list during the first subgroup meeting. We had a subsequent subgroup meeting last week, and we have some questions that we have given to Jose to circulate around Fairfax County staff to ask some questions that will, once Jose gets some timing, then he'll bring those questions back to the full task force, and that will help us make the final decision on the language to go in our version of the comp plan. But in the meantime, a few of the things that we did finish up was to talk about Barron Cameron Park versus the sports tourism facility concept. And the decision there is because we have not, as a group, had a whole lot of presentation from any one group on what sports tourism means. We plan to add to the draft to have the proposal, anything that would change Barron Cameron from its current master plan. We would say that those have to go through the master planning process before they would be accepted, or a change to the current master plan would be accepted. and also that some consideration be given to transportation issues related to anything related to tourism that might come about because another use is proposed for Bear and Cameron Park. We also talked about the difference between turf fields and grass fields and what the cost concerns were and the health concerns. And what we decided there was that the Fairfax County has studied this so far, and what they have determined is that turf fields right now are the preferable field or type of field, and that we need to stick with what Fairfax County is saying, and that we know that there are other studies that are going on right now that may change that in the future, but the Reston plan should stick to what Fairfax County's recommendation was. That was very close vote within the subgroup. I think there were 9 of us on the subgroup, and so it was a vote of 5 to 4. So definitely understand that it's a topic that has a dichotomy of views related to it, but that's how it was decided in the subgroup. Also for trails, we're going to get some of our questions answered related to funding in general, one of them in the area of the trails, but that we need a list of the trail recommendations, which are currently partially, trails are really in the transportation section, and so we are going to leave them in the transportation section, but make sure there's a list of recommendations in the transportation section for any trail connections. And then we're going to add some language related to civic plazas and make sure that they're on either side of the TSAs. And we're going to have some graphic examples related to those. And then we also talked about the wetlands that I believe Malcolm had brought up as a topic, and we do think that the wetlands should be referred in the Parks and Rec section. And we looked at all of the language in the current comp plan, and we decided on a few pieces that we want to bring into this version of the comp plan, and one other thought related to that. So now what the subgroup is doing is we've kind of split up among a few people some different text edits that we might add based on the recommendations or the discussions that we had. We'll add those text items to the full text that we have. We'll get that presentation from Fairfax County staff on some questions that we asked them, and then we will circulate a full draft back out to the full task force so you can see all the changes that were made and be able to comment at a future meeting. So that's our update.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions from the group or comments to Jennifer?
Jose, this is David Vanel. Jennifer, when you were talking and working on the trails issues, did you run into any information about how much more extension and connection there has to be, that has to be done with the trails to make them what they should be? And did you find any estimates of time frame and cost?
We have not found anything related to cost. We specifically talked about tall oaks and the TSA connection points, and also to into Lake Fairfax from the Reston proper side. We also have from RA a wish list that we could use to put into the plan, and I know that if we want to talk specifically about costs, Larry would have that information, because, and I want to say, is it like $23 a foot, or there's something that RA, because they obviously have made a big portion of the trail system in Reston, but they do have kind of a going rate for what the cost is per per foot or per square foot, something like that, that I'm sure that we can get from them to use as a guide. But if
Thank you very much.
anyone has any other potential trail recommendations, if you want to email them to the task force email group, I'm happy to add them to the list in the text.
If I may interject here, this is Tammy. If it's $24, $23 a linear foot, every municipality, including the county, will be hiring ROA to do this. It is way more, it may be a square foot, but it's not a linear foot.
Yes, and
That's a dirt cheap
I
price.
know. I will get I will get something from Larry, but that, you know, you're talking probably something that I read in my, you know, last 5 years.
Yeah, and the other point on this is transportation was going to make the definitive list. Putting, you know, we know where we know of gaps,
Yeah.
but some fabulous person with the TAC committee,
Right.
I think, did a more complete inventory of needed connections. So that was not, we did not take that on as a task. We
Correct.
knew where there were some gaps, but not all. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Any other questions for Jennifer? Okay, well, I don't see Michelle.
Hey, Jose, can you hear me?
Oh, Chris. Yeah, go ahead, Chris Daniel.
Yeah, I'm not going to be here for the full meeting, and I decided to let the whole task force know due to a list here of email snafu, but forgive me for that. I wanted to at least give a little update on Heritage. I've gotten a lot of input from folks since our last meeting and have been working on doing some revisions. I hope to have something for the group for our next meeting to look at, and hopefully we're getting closer to something that we can move forward into the compendium of sections that we're happy with, or at least somewhat satisfied with. If Michelle's not yet here, I can at least speak somewhat to the equity group and the community health conversations.
Please.
We did meet at the end of last month to talk about the direction for the equity section as well. And so we're looking at whether or not we are talking about language that would be a small chapter on equity with some guiding principles, or whether or not we would just be encouraging sections to integrate some of the points into their individual sections. We kind of hashed that topic out. The other issue, we started some initial conversations on community health, and I think, see that as being a section that has some particular guiding milestones almost for community health. We didn't get too much farther in that, but my understanding is that we're planning another meeting, and I know staff also provided us with a lot of data that we were seeking, which was information on healthcare, both public and private, in the Reston area, so that we could have a better understanding of what the current numbers and metrics are. That's about all I can provide at the moment on that one.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Chris? Or I know that the other members of the Equity and Community Health group are on as well.
Yeah, and obviously, if any members of the group want to add any more embellishments on what we talked about, I was just trying to give my best off-the-cuff summary for what we talked about.
Thank you, Chris. Hearing none, I think we're okay. Please, thank you guys all for the update. And sorry, Chris, I totally forgot to put Heritage Resources on the agenda.
That's all right.
That's my bad. Sorry. So with that, I think we can go to the presentation. I know we have county staff on affordable housing today to present some information to the task force. I believe Graham Owen. Oh yeah, Supervisor.
Jose, before we go on there, Jose, you're doing such a great job. I joined about 15 minutes ago, but
it's harder than it looks.
Yeah, sometimes. But thank you, Jose. So, Jose, I'm not sure if you said something about putting the compendium together of the different sections.
Oh, no, I did not. Thank you. Thank you for catching that. So at the previous meeting, I had shared kind of a compiled section of all the chapters with the group. And I think the goal as we proceed with the meetings is to kind of send out updates as we receive them so everyone can see week to week how each section kind of evolves. My goal is to at least try to send it out before the meeting, just so people have the most recent version, because I know that each section is working on stuff. So that was something that I was planning on to keep on doing, and with the table of contents, so folks can easily get to the section that they want to make sure that some of the edits or some changes are as well. So I'll be doing that on Mondays.
Right. So for the next task force meeting, the agenda might look a little different. Probably be working, basically going through the different chapters in the compendium of the different sections, and then doing the updates that way. So, and there we'll also see the latest version, and then information about when it's expected to be updated next, and who's on point. Okay. Thank you very much, Jose. Jose, were there any other updates?
Actually, one update while I have the floor. Not our next meeting, which will be scheduled Monday, July 12th, but the following one was originally scheduled Tuesday, July 20th. And I'll be sending an updated WebEx calendar invite to everyone. We're going to push that one day. That week is a little troublesome because on Monday, Reston Planning and Zoning meets. And then on Tuesday, July 20th, Reston Town Center North goes to the Reston Association Design Review Board. So to accommodate those that wanted to attend both, and then we're going to go ahead and go with Wednesday, July 21st. So I'll be sending an updated invite to everybody and sending an email as well.
All right, great. Thank you, Jose. Any questions on any of the updates? Anything else before we move to item number 3 on the agenda? Okay. All right. Well, then let's go back. I know when I joined, actually, David, you were talking a little bit about housing. I think we've got a lot more. We do have a presentation from Housing and Community Development this evening. And Abdi, are you on point for HCD tonight, or?
Good evening, Supervisor Alcorn. So we're tag teaming it. Graham Owens from Department of Planning and Development, I think, will be leading the presentation, and I'm here myself from Department of Housing and Community Development, and then we have our folks from Virginia Center for Housing Research that will also be in. So we will be tag teaming.
Okay, great. Well then, Abdi, I'll turn it over to you, and then afterwards we'll David, I'll actually ask you to go over the document you put together, and some very good back and forth on email server over the weekend. So
yes, please let Graham will be the presenter, and I failed to mention also Judith Cabelli is here from Department of Housing and Community Development, and among some other Department of Planning and Development staff that are here to help to answer any questions.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Abdi. So Graham, do you have the baton at this point?
I think so. So hopefully I've been able to share my screen successfully. I'm not sure if you're able to see the presentation or not.
Yes, we can.
We can see it.
All right, well, thank you. And Abdi's correct. We have a kind of a tag team approach for this evening in terms of the staff presentations, but I'm Graham Owen with the Department of Planning and Development. And Abdi Hamoud, who you just heard from, is with the Department of Housing and Community Development. He's kind of our inclusionary zoning and planning guru. So he's really the point person for a lot of our affordable housing initiatives in the county. One of the other presenters that we're going to have, as Abdi mentioned, is Mel Jones with the Virginia Center for Housing Research at Virginia Tech. So we're hoping to do a couple of things tonight. We spoke with the task force last for affordable housing in March. So the first topic that we want to cover is just going to be a brief recap of what we covered at that meeting regarding inclusionary housing, specifically our workforce dwelling unit policy, which is a policy that lives in the comprehensive plan and which can be something that the Reston Task Force can look at in particular. We had some interest from the task force in looking at the specifics of the WDU policy as it relates to the Reston plan, and in particular the transit station areas, where nearly all of the WDUs have been constructed to date, and where the plan sets out a higher expectation in terms of affordable housing. So we'll be also looking at, with Mel Jones's help, we'll be looking at a production exchange that looks at the specifics of what can be looked at in terms of commitment level for workforce dwelling unit policy, given our existing policy framework, and in particular our bonus density provisions that are in the comp plan to date. And then finally, we're going to conclude with a briefing on the Affordable Housing Preservation Policy Plan Amendment, which was authorized in April. So this will be a very quick refresh, but on the adopted Reston plan. So affordable housing has really been a part of Reston since its onset. Robert Simon's goal number 2 speaks to affordable housing in particular, noting that housing needs can be met at a variety of income levels and at different stages of family life, allowing people to stay in the community. And this results in a heterogeneity that spells a lively and varied community. Affordable housing is also included in Reston Planning Principle number 4, which notes that residential neighborhoods will continue to provide a variety of housing types and sizes serving all incomes. All right, now I'll turn it over to Abdi.
Thank you, Graham. We wanted to provide a refresher on our workforce dwelling unit program and policy. As you may recall, the workforce dwelling unit policy lives within the comprehensive plan, and it is a profit-based incentive system. As far as the product or construction type that it applies to, it's mid-rise and high-rise construction. Or another way to put it, construction that is exempt from our ADU Affordable Dwelling Unit Program ordinance. To date, we, throughout the county, including Tysons and Reston, we have a little over 1,700 units that have been produced, constructed, and delivered by the private market. A majority of those are rental WDUs, and a small number are for sale WDUs. And last but not least, a little under 400 units have been produced in Reston. And once again, a majority of those units are rental multifamily units. This next slide captures, in our meeting in March, we provided a list of ADUs and WDUs in Reston, but the task force requested that we provide a map. So this shows where the ADUs and WDUs are in Reston. There's a total of 417 units within Reston, and then we also provided a breakdown of the AMIs that are served, whether it's under the ADU or WDU programs. Next slide. Thank you, Graham. This next slide is providing a snapshot of the countywide WDU rental policy. The first column is the previous WDU policy that was adopted by the board in 2007. As you can see, the total commitment were 12% WDU commitment, and it would serve equally 3 income tiers, the 80, the 100, and the 120% AMI. On the right-hand column, what we have is the newly adopted workforce dwelling unit policy that was adopted by the board in February of 2021. With the amendment, what the goal of the amendment was to capture the affordability that was needed. So it's a total of 8% commitment. However, the units that are being served are between the 60 and 80% of the area median income, which is identified as the greatest need in Fairfax County. Next slide, Graham. And last but not least, this slide captures a breakdown as far as example of units expected, units, total number of units committed. The second column has a range of bonus density that could be achieved. which could be as little as 12%, all the way to 20%. And what it's connected with is the commitment or expectation of WDUs, which the county minimum currently is 8%. But if there's more units or more percent of WDUs that are delivered or committed, a developer may achieve more bonus density.
And so one thing we would note in particular with regards to Reston, as many of you are aware, Reston has the transit station areas that are along the Silver Line. And within those transit station areas, which the previous map showed is the areas with the greatest concentration of both ADUs and WDUs. The comprehensive plan in Reston contains unique language with regards to what the commitment levels are in these areas. So proposals that are seeking up to a 1.0 floor area ratio or FAR should meet, and this is the adopted plan that was not changed as a part of the countywide policy, a 12% WDU commitment. So that's a higher expectation now than it is under the countywide. Proposals that are up to 1.0 should provide greater WDUs as intensity increases, which is shown in the sliding scale that you see in the chart to the right. So basically, as you have greater FAR that's allowed, then you get a higher percentage of WDUs. So 12% is the current floor for a 1.0 FAR or up to a 1.0 FAR. And then as you go higher in terms of your requested FAR, the percentage of WDUs that is recommended increases. So that's the adopted. And so what we wanted to do and what we heard from the task force was that there's interest in looking at the numbers, specifics of percentage of WDUs that could be applied and could be considered as a part of this policy plan amendment. So Mel Jones with the Virginia Center for Housing Research has helped us in the past with prior studies looking at the countywide policy plan amendment that was recently adopted, as Abby mentioned, in February, and also helped us with the Tyson's policy. So she's been gracious in helping us with the Reston plan. So I would like to introduce you to Mel. And Mel, if you're on the line, I saw your name in the participants panel, but feel free to walk us through and just let me know when you want me to change slides.
Sounds good. Thanks, Graham. So before I get started, I want to also mention that my graduate assistant, Sungbi Choi, is on the line, and he has done the vast majority of this analysis and has done a great job. And Sungbi, just jump in if you need to. So as Graham mentioned, the methodology used in this analysis was developed as we were considering changes to the countywide plan. But then we've adapted it to make some considerations in Tyson's, and now adapted it again to think about Reston. The underlying data was updated as part of this Reston analysis. So we're now using April 2021 CoStar data. CoStar data is just a very good source for rents by the size of a unit and in different properties. Then we also applied the WDU program rents and unit square footages, just so that we can get a median square foot to think about. We use VHDA or Virginia Housing cost limits for inner Northern Virginia as a part of our production cost analysis. We also have a great database of low-income housing tax credit production costs that we use here. And finally, RS means cost data, which is sort of a baseline source for developers when they're thinking about costs of development. Not to mention that in the process of developing this method, we had a number of developers from Fairfax think about this and vet it with us. So we're feeling very good about the methodology. Go ahead, Graham. Production costs have changed a little bit since the first analysis that we did, and here it's just reflective of those changes. So back in August 2019, we were looking at a production cost of $302 per square foot. And now in the most recent update, which was done in January 2021, we're looking at $317 per square foot. Go ahead, Graham. And next, we'll just give you a little bit of, the costs of providing a WDU or really any unit based on bedroom size. So you have a median square foot here, and then the cost per unit and the monthly payment on behalf of the developer. Go ahead, Graham. And then specific to the Reston market, here you just have something to kind of give you a landscape of the market. For all of Reston, you have the total number of units by number of bedrooms and the percent of the market they represent. And then in a subpopulation of Reston, those built 2013 and later, which as Abdi explained, most developments that are producing WDUs are built 2013 or later and are generally mid or high-rise developments. And so you can kind of see the breakdown again of units by bedroom and the percent of the market they represent. Okay, and here you have the meat of our tool that we built to help us create this analysis. So what you're looking at is the difference between a WDU rent and a market rent. Where you see the green squares lit up, it means that the WDU rent is actually higher than the market rent. So units are being provided to those AMI levels in those bedroom sizes in the market. And so this is part of the impetus for revising the county-wide plan, is because these units were being provided in the market. And then the ones you see in red, those are where the WDU rents do offer some subsidy and make things more affordable for folks. And then in the bottom half of this table, what you have is the number of market rate units that would be needed to offset the cost of providing one WDU unit at that AMI level of that number of bedrooms. Go ahead, Graham. Oh, you can skip one. You guys already talked about the sliding scale in Reston, and that we try to reflect the sliding scale in these scenarios that we are providing you. So this is the first set of those scenarios, and we have two sets. One assumes a WDU requirement and then asks the question, how much density bonus is needed to offset that commitment? And then the next slide will show you, assuming that we keep a density bonus constant, how much WDU commitment we can ask for. So here's the first one, keeping the requirement constant. And so you can see for an FAR1 where you would look for a 12% commitment, it would require in the scenario that you split it evenly among 60, 70, and 80% of AMI, a 15.17% density bonus. And then the second column under the 1.0 FAR is where we allow developers to do a few more of the 80s instead of the 60s and 70s. And so 1:1:2 ratio, and it requires a little bit less density bonus, but pretty comparable. And so you can see going all the way up to 3, you're still under a 20% density bonus, the FAR3, still under a 20% density bonus. And then with FAR4 plus, you get up into the 20s. Graham, is there anything else you wanted to point out? Nope.
I think the only thing that I would add to that point about the distinction between 20, under 20 or above 20, just as a reminder, the adopted countywide policy plan does not allow for a density bonus to exceed 20%. So that's the reason for that notation in terms of this particular chart, is that at least in the 4+ FAR scenarios, you're seeing bonus requirements or bonus recommendations rather that are in excess of what the countywide policy would provide for.
Thanks, Graham. And let's go to the next slide. So in this case, we fixed the density bonus and say what's possible in terms of developing WDUs. And we've given you 4 scenarios here. One scenario is the percentage of WDUs you could ask for if they were all at 60% of AMI. Then you have them split among 60 and 70% of AMI. And we used 2 rules when we were trying to hone in on this split. One, we prefer to serve lower incomes where the difference, where you could have one more WDU, it could be 60 or it could be 70. We chose 60, and then we tried to get as many WDUs as possible. So you see there, when you get to 60 and 70, you could have 7% 60 and 50% 70 in return for a 17% density bonus. And then the third one is split between 60, 70, and 80, same rule. And then the final one is what you would get if you did the 1-1-2 ratio split, which this allows you guys to kind of weigh how much you want to put emphasis on that ratio versus emphasis on creating units for lower income levels or the greatest number of total units. We're hoping that these 2 charts kind of allow you to weigh your preferences and sort of bang for your buck in density bonus. What do you say, Graham? Anything else?
No, that about sums it up. We know that we threw a lot of charts at you just now, and so we wanted to open the floor to any questions that you have with regards to this analysis. We wanted to provide those 2 tables because in terms of how the task force wanted to approach its work of going about thinking through a recommendation, there's a lot of variables that could be changed. And so our goal with this was to take a look at what's out there in terms of possibilities, but we're happy to answer any questions that you have with regards to the slides in terms of WDU exchange.
Graham, there was a question in the chat about ADUs, and I know there was a previous slide that I believe there are 2 developments in Reston that have ADUs. Could you put that up and then maybe just give a quick summary of the difference?
Absolutely, and I can jump in here as well if I say something that's incorrect. So in terms of ADUs and WDUs, this chart shows the location of for sale units, which are the blue dots and the blue triangles, and then rental, the green dots and triangles. So the ADUs are the dots. So what you'll see is number 10, for example, that's a for sale ADU. And then number 1, Aperture, also included some ADUs. So I think those are the only 2 locations in the Reston TSAs that have ADUs specifically. So as Abby was describing, the vast majority of our committed units that we get as a part of our inclusionary policies and ordinances are WDUs. The chief differences between ADUs and WDUs is that ADUs are provided through the ADU ordinance. So there's some very specific parameters for the inclusion of ADU units. One of them is a 50-unit threshold. The other is a construction type requirement. So you're not seeing it in the higher rise construction. You're typically seeing it in projects that provide units at 4 stories or less. So we also see fewer of them as a result of those restrictions in terms of the applicability of the ordinance. The WDU policy, which is something that lives in the comprehensive plan, in a lot of ways is there to try to fill in those gaps, to try to be able to provide inclusionary units in mid-rise and high-rise construction types, especially where the ADU ordinance does not require them. So those are the spots in particular that we have on the ground ADUs kind of in this neck of the woods.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Linda, do you have any other questions about that? Hey, does that make sense?
Of course I did.
I thought you might. Go ahead.
So, I just want to thank Graham and Abdi and Mel. And I know you said that you have a intern that providing support. So thanks to you all for all of the work that you've done. But if we could go back to something that Abdi was saying. I think we were on slide number 4. And did I hear you correctly when you said that the WDUs are exempt from the ADU policy?
Yeah, thank you for your question. And yes, the best way I want to answer it. So our affordable dwelling unit program is mandatory under the Fairfax County zoning ordinance. And the workforce dwelling unit policy lives in the comprehensive plan and is a policy. So I want to make those two distinct kind of differences, that the ADU program is mandatory. And in the ADU program, as Graham mentioned, it's really the construction type that triggers it and it's applicable to is what is referred to as type 5 construction, which is when we're looking at our multifamily buildings, they're really 4-story or less. And your traditional kind of garden style apartments is what triggers the ADU program requirements. As Graham mentioned, I think the board in 2007 recognized that that exemption and created the workforce dwelling unit policy to capture construction types like mid-rise and high-rise construction.
I think that, I mean, just a point of observation is I really do think that we're doing a grave disservice to that would be eligible for an ADU by limiting it to 4 stories or under. All of the construction that has been taking place along the TSA, and this is the area that people need to have access to transportation. I just think that we're doing a grave disservice to our citizens by not making that available to other construction. I don't know what the different types of construction are. Whether a type 4 would be a high rise or a type 6 would be a high rise, but anything on the other side of a type 5, I just think that we're doing a grave disservice to our citizens by not offering ADUs within the TSA in the high rise. And then just a point of clarification, you had mentioned the map that showed the ADUs, and number 10, which is Tall Oaks, is clearly outside of the TSA. So that is not a TSA accommodation. Thank you.
Lynn, can I just, let me ask Abdi a question about the ADU applicability outside of high rises. Is that a state law, or is that our interpretation at the county level of what's legally permissible?
That's a good.
That's a great question. So I do know in order to adopt the affordable dwelling unit program back in the early 90s, we did have to get permission from Richmond to have our ADU program. And what I was referencing is within our Fairfax County zoning ordinance as far as the ADU program section in there and what construction types are applicable. So you could find what triggers our ADU requirement and what's exempt within our Fairfax County zoning ordinance. And hopefully, if some of our DPD staff are here to correct me, please go ahead and do so.
I was just going to add to what Abby said. He's absolutely correct. I think the chief difference, and this is hopefully going to get to Lynn's point as well, the chief difference between ADUs and WDUs in terms of our authority, there are specific parameters that are in the Code of Virginia, so the state enabling legislation with regards to ADUs, affordable dwelling units, that we have to adhere to. WDUs, since they're a creature of the comprehensive plan, so to speak, they're a policy rather than a requirement. And it's something that can be discussed as a part of the rezoning process and through the land development process. We have a lot more flexibility in terms of what we're enabled to do under the comprehensive plan as opposed to the zoning ordinance. So the chief difference that we're moving towards with the WDU, the countywide WDU policy plan amendment, was the shifting of the AMIs down, which is the real benefit, so to speak. So ADUs was looking at AMIs of 50% of AMI and 70% of AMI. That's the way that it is today. And with the WDU change, we shifted the AMIs down to 80%, 70%, and 60% of AMI. So it's getting very close to looking at the same subset of the population in terms of what's the benefit to the people that need affordable housing in particular. So the goal is to, it's getting these pretty darn close. It's just the mechanism by which you do that. So, Bill, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just add with ADUs.
Was that Bill Malin?
It is.
Hey.
Hello. With ADUs, depending upon it, it's only type 5 construction, which is wood construction. Typically, we're seeing type 3 construction, which is steel, and the high rises. It's as Graham and Abdi said, it's only 4 stories and below. So if you do a multifamily ADU, depending upon your parking, if you construct, parking either surface parking or not, you're only doing between 5 and 6.25% ADUs, and you're given a 17% bonus. If you do in townhomes or single family detached, you get 12.5% ADUs with a 20% bonus. What Reston has always done is look at the ADU requirement first and say, all right, we're going to get 5% ADUs, but we're still expecting a 12% total affordability. So we add the required ADUs at whatever maybe 5%, and then ask for the remainder of 12% as workforce dwelling units. So I think in all the projects we've got in Reston, at the minimum, there's 12% or more of affordable units. But the ADUs always comes first. It's just very few projects trigger ADUs. There's probably a couple more that have been approved that have not been built. But we don't have a lot, just countywide, quite frankly. ADUs tend to be more in single family attached because a lot of the multifamily construction is not type 5 anymore.
Thank you. Just one point that
Lynn, please.
Walter, sorry, but
sure.
Looking at the table that is in front of us all, I just want to point out that Chuck Veach and his team that developed Aperture, I just have to give them kudos. And I think that seeing where Aperture is located in relation to the Wheelie Reston Metro, and having that ADU rental is fabulous. So I wish we had more developers like them.
I will note that this is showing what's constructed. It's not reflecting what's in the pipeline. And I used to track ADUWDs, and since I moved out of zoning evaluation and zoning administration almost 2 years ago, I haven't done that. But when I looked at my old numbers, we had over 1,700 ADUWDs, mostly WDUs, in the pipeline. Now, some of those have been constructed, but a vast majority are still waiting to be constructed. It's, as you know, it's development phase. The WDU comes in with the phase development. So, I think every application was 12% or better, and many of them, quite frankly, did better than the policy for AMIs in Reston with the help of Commissioner Carter, Supervisor Alcor, and Supervisor Hudgens, where we always place an emphasis on lower AMIs in Reston from the beginning.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you, Bill. Thank you.
Right.
I'll stop now.
That's okay, Lynn. Thank you for your comments and questions. I see 2 hands, Tammy Petrine and Charles Colby. Tammy, go on ahead.
Thank you. I have a bunch of questions, but like Lynn, I've always been discouraged as hell that if a building has an elevator and is not wood construction, that ADUs were able to be excluded. That makes 0 sense to me. And I hope that whatever rule or law or ordinance or anything can be changed, because that is just nuts. I also, hats off to Chuck Beach, and he put Aperture very affordable ADUs right next to the most expensive property around. So it can be done. I would like for someone on staff to explain for everybody on the task force how bonus density actually works and the purpose thereof, so that people have a better, there are lots of charts and terms thrown at people who aren't used to this terminology. So please, please do that. And then I want to talk about this chart on page 6. But let's have an explanation of bonus density. When you say 12% or whatever you had on the other charts, exactly what are you referring to and why? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tammy, and Abdi, Bill, if you guys want to jump in at some point, just let me know. I'll walk you through countywide how it works. So, and then we'll shift over to Reston because there are some unique circumstances with regards to the sliding scale. So with regards to countywide, let's skip over that left-hand column that you see. That's the old countywide policy that went up to 120% of AMI. So let's just focus specifically on the rental units that are under the rental program that is the new WDU policy that was adopted by the board starting in February. So what this policy says is that you can have, if you're looking at projects that are mid-rise, high-rise construction types, and 8%, and these are largely located in our activity centers, by the way, so this applies to anywhere where you have, transit station areas or community business centers, Tyson's, et cetera. An 8% commitment level in terms of the number of units that are provided in a development. Of those 8%, right now with the countywide, 4% are at 80%, 2% are at 70%, and 2% are at 60% AMI. So that 8% gets broken down into varying income tiers. And then in exchange for, and this is basically the carrot of the policy, is that in exchange for that meeting the policy, a developer can avail themselves up to a 12% density bonus of market rate units. So that's additional market rate units that they can construct on their site in exchange for providing these committed, affordable workforce dwelling units. So,
is this 12% of the total of the project?
Let me show you the chart that explains. That's the next chart over here. So this is the exchange that shows the ratio of bonus to workforce. So if you look at the first row under the headings, if you start on the second to the right-hand column, you'll see the percentage of workforce dwelling units out of the total number of units. So if you provide 8%, that's the minimum policy commitment level for countywide, then you can avail yourself up to a 12% total density bonus. So you get 12 units that are provided out of a total, for example, 100 unit development. So your total number would be 112 units, and the total number of WDUs would be based on that total number of units that's provided. So you take, in this example, a base of 100 units, add to it 12 bonus units, and then you base the 8% calculation for WDUs on that total number of units. So you actually end up with 9 as opposed to 8, just because of the way that the math works. So it's kind of confusing, but the way that this chart is set up is you look at bonus first, and then you base the WDUs based on the total number of units plus your density bonus that you avail yourself of.
And one thing the Reston plan talks about is, and it's actually the conference plan in general, is full WDU commitment, regardless if you recognize you get a bonus or not. So in Graham's scenario of 112 units with bonus, if the development site only accommodates 100 units, we're still asking for 8 WDUs. Now this would be countywide policy, which we would have applied to the greater Reston area. Now the TSAs has a sliding scale where the base starts at 12% versus 8%, for 12% up to 20% WDUs, and a similar, right now we would look at Reston, I think it would be, almost a 1-to-1 versus this is a kind of a slightly different ratio going on a current comp plan until this task force makes any revision or updates it.
Right.
Okay, so the rationale is that the developer gets to build extra units that he'll be able to charge full market rent for to offset the expense of him subsidizing the WDU or ADU, depending on, it's usually WDU, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so I just want people on the task force to understand this rationale. All right, can we go back to page, or is there something special you want to do with Reston? I just wanted to get the theory of what we're doing here. We are allowing a developer to recoup their costs in order to give this fabulous WDU opportunity for 50 years since the beginning of the year. Used to be 30 years. So it's a limited get from the developer, but it's a permanent get on the extra unit. And at the end of the contract, 50 years, this unit goes back to the developer. They may or may not choose to continue the subsidy or the gift to the community. So I just want everybody to have in their mind what exactly is going on here as far as this generosity is concerned. So is there something else about Reston that's specific?
I think it's just the sliding scale that Bill mentioned. So that's the next slide over here, which is specific to the transit station area. So outside of the TSAs, then this chart would apply. So you'd be looking at an 8% commitment level in exchange for 12% bonus. That's countywide policy. It applies to the remainder of Reston outside of the TSAs today. And
okay.
Keep in mind, and this is what Mel had described in terms of the exchange, in the exchange analysis, is in the TSAs, there's an explicit 12% commitment level, which is the minimum expectation for developments that are seeking up to a 1.0 FAR. And then if you want additional intensity in terms of your square footage for your development within the TSAs, then the percentage increases. Basically at a 1-to-1 click in terms of total percentage of units in exchange for your total 0.5 of FAR that you want in addition. So one thing I'd mention, if you go back, so this is what Mel was kind of describing, is that if you go back to this table right here and you go to the fourth from the bottom row, so hopefully everybody's following me here, that is showing what is the current policy exchange for rental within Reston TSA. So a 12% commitment level would yield a 17% maximum density bonus that you could avail yourself of today under the adopted language. And so that's one of the that Mel had described in terms of optionality for lower AMIs in particular.
Okay, cool. We go.
We're talking about the WDUs are for the workhorse, but it's residential, is it?
Yes.
It is residential. So that would be a perfect time to do the ADUs instead of the WDUs.
Well,
for the bonus.
No, the bonus is full price market rent. That was my point. They're not, the developer is giving this huge gift to the community of some subsidized WDU units, which are workforce housing. And they're not required to give ADUs if the building has an elevator. When you have an extra FAR, the FAR goes up, you're getting an elevator because it's a higher building, right?
The elevator in itself doesn't exempt you from the ADU ordinance because you have elevators. It's a construction type. It's type 5. So yes, I mean, it's type 5 construction can have an elevator, but what we're typically seeing is type 3 construction in the TSAs.
Mid and high rise are the higher FARs, and those are exempt from ADUs. So that you're coming, Jan, where I'm going. Can we go to the page 6? Thank you. All right, now check out this. This is, look on the left column. This was the previous, prior to the first of the year when it changed to the right. If you're talking about 100 and 120% AMI, you're talking about a working family with an income of excess of $122,000 approximately. It's probably higher now, the COG AMI of 100%. So we're not talking about poverty-stricken people here. 120, that's crazy. That's a well-to-do. You know, that's not a rich family, but that's a family that's doing very well. Okay, so we get 4% at 80. When you get to 60, maybe 65%, you're talking about top range of an ADU family. These are working people who are struggling, usually two people working, and their maximum income for the family is 60 to 65%. Those are the people or less are ADU categories. When you're talking about 70 and 80%, they're still struggling. Those are police, fire, teachers, some service workers, etc. But look at these crazy percentages. We've taken away, we've reduced the commitment from 12 to 8%, but 2% at 60 and 2% at 70 and 4% at 80. Forget the old thing. Those last two AMIs of 100 and 120, those weren't rents that anybody in their right mind who needs assistance would even apply for. So I would guess most of those units went lacking or were vacant. So all of a sudden, oh, now we're changing our policy and we're reducing it to 8, but check down below, we're still giving a bonus density of 12%. I don't understand how this makes any sense or equity when we are desperate for these units and the bonus kicks in if the developer wants to, you know, and has a capacity to add more units. And this, if I understand correctly, this is for 49 units, more than 49 units. So if you have a project that takes 50 units, you got to do this stuff. We saw the chart for 100. It's easy for us to figure out the percentages, but this accrues if you have a project of 50. If you have 49 or less, you don't have to do this. Is that right?
That's actually, that's
so
not
Tammy,
true.
Okay, what is it now, Bill?
ADUs kicks in at 50 dwellings per unit. WDUs can kick at any point the comp plan recommends that. We did Reston, we did the Seekers project in Reston was under 45 units and it has WDUs in it. So we absolutely asked for and received WDUs in Reston for under 50 units. Pulte also under 50 units had WDUs. So ADUs 50 units is by ordinance where it kicks in at.
Okay, but am I not correct that John Carter negotiated that Seekers stuff? Or
actually, I don't know if that was with John. I mean, I was part of that team and negotiated it. So I mean, I think it started with staff. John Carter was certainly supportive and did a great job with ADUs. I don't remember if John was part when Seekers came through. That was Commissioner Delafay. Timing, I don't remember.
You're right. You're right. It was Delafay, but that was a great negotiation on that specific. But I'm just like, I'm personally considering that the developer can get extra units built to take up any loss they have in rents with these bonus units.
Well, I can say
I'm just appalled.
In the Seekers development specifically, there were no bonus units provided. And the project next door, there's no bonus units provided. So
that's an exception. In the high rises, they're asking for bonus units.
Honestly, I think it's about half to 60% of the projects get a bonus. I could look at it a little closer, but there's a lot of times, quite frankly, and again, it's bonus on the comprehensive plan density, and it could be bonus on the zoning ordinance, but no one's going above the zoning ordinance density. It's a comp plan they're going above. So it's bonus on that, and that's 20%, up to 20%, based upon how many WDUs provide. So I will say, I mean, the Vernado application right at Wheelie Metro on the south side didn't get a bonus because they at 2.5, which was the comp plan, but they provided the full percentage of WDUs. I forget that 16% in that area. So again, it depends, you know, we're across the street, Campus Commons, they did a bonus.
Yeah, Vernado has not been built yet.
I know.
Yeah, so, and that is definitely coming in for an amendment. So we don't know what that's going to be, but Anyway,
It's a case by case where the developer can realize a bonus and takes advantage of what the comp plan currently provide. In some cases, they can't realize a bonus, but the expectation for WDUs is the same.
so
The full percentage.
what you're saying is Tammy's being too harsh on the developers?
Not in the least. I mean,
Oh, thanks. Good, smart
I
man.
was
Actually, Tammy, let's get the counterpoint.
Yeah.
Let's get the real
Yeah.
counterpoint. Mark
Yeah.
Limney's had his
Mark
hand up for a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, Mark, tell us why we shouldn't get rid of the bonus density.
Tammy, be harder, Mark.
Don't worry, I'm ready.
Yeah, I'll go back to the conversation that I had back in March about the way this whole thing is constructed and why it's constructed that way. And the supervisor was alluding to this without actually addressing it head on, which is there's a court case that goes back to the early 1970s when Fairfax County first enacted an ADU ordinance that said X% of all units constructed in any development are required to have subsidized units in them. And the pesky Virginia Supreme Court said that's an unconstitutional taking of private property. And so the ADU ordinance was then authorized by the General Assembly to provide local governments with authority to create ADU ordinances, number one. And number two, they still had to comply with the constitutional requirement that they not take private property for governmental purpose without compensation. So the compensation became bonus density. That's why the ADU ordinance is structured the way it is in very specific terms based on 6 1/4 or 5, forget the numbers, but 6 1/4 and 12%, 12.5%, depending on whether you've got a 10% or a 20% bonus on the ADU ordinance. And it's tied to specific income levels. It hasn't been looked at probably in 20 years at this point in terms of its I'll call it proper calibration, but nonetheless, that's what it is and why it is. When the WDU ordinance or WDU policy was put in place, the same expectation was applied to the WDU policy that there not be an unconstitutional taking of private property. Now, the fact that it's being offered in the context of a rezoning changes somewhat the calculus of how that's viewed, but nonetheless, the objective was to keep it as constitutional as possible by trying to align bonus density with the subsidized units. What's ended up taking place is that the AMI levels were too high, and you won't get any argument out of me, Tammy, that the 80, 100, and 120 were too high. They didn't provide the units that everybody thought they were going to provide, and so you needed to bring those AMI numbers down. The question was how to do that in a way that passed constitutional muster and provided the developer with the appropriate compensation for subsidizing the units. I think what you're hearing tonight, and I'll ask Graham a question as we get into this, is what's the appropriate income levels for targeting those units? I think the 60, 70, and 80 are the appropriate target levels for the AMI. The argument's going to be over whether it's split 3 ways or whether there's emphasis on certain income or AMI levels over other AMI levels, and whether in fact a development can achieve the bonus density that Bill was talking about. In a lot of wood frame construction buildings, the height of the building is limited by the fire code. And you can't go beyond 5 stories on a 5A construction type, and you can't go above 7 stories typically on a 3A construction type because the fire code limits the height. The height is what gives you the bonus density. So you could end up with a scenario, and developers often do, where there is an expectation to provide WDUs, but they can't take advantage of the bonus density. The challenge with lowering it's one thing to say that you don't get a bonus density or you can't use a bonus density when your AMI numbers are at 80, 100, and 120. It's a totally different conversation when your AMI levels are at 60, 70, and 80%, and you can't use the bonus density because of the height restrictions in the fire code for 3A or 5A construction. And so you're trying to figure out what's the sweet spot for how to ensure that developers have the opportunity to recoup the subsidies that they are providing in order to make it constitutional, at the same time getting the AMI levels down. If I look at page, and this is my question for Graham, which is if I look at page 16 of your presentation, which is the 12 and 17% bonus densities that you have, those numbers are higher across the board than the numbers adopted by the Board of Supervisors for Tyson's. And Tyson's was higher than the countywide. And I guess my question is, how is it that the Reston numbers could pencil out higher than the Tyson's numbers when the Tyson's numbers were intended to be the Mac Daddy best of the best countywide?
Thank you very much, Mark. I just want to say that the higher the density, the more people in Reston. Reston is not the size of Tyson's. We don't want to be another Tyson's. We want to be more of a parks-oriented space. And we certainly don't want to be above Tyson's in the way of density. The idea is to get the numbers down from Reston so we don't have 157,000 people, which is what will happen if we don't make some adjustments to these dwelling units. Thank you very much.
Mark, you had a question for Graham?
Yeah, my question was just looking at this chart, these are all the Tyson's numbers are, if memory serves me correctly, there were two options provided for developments in Tyson's. One is they can provide units at all three in AMI levels, 60, 70, and 80%. And I think the numbers were 2% at 60, 3% at 70, and 8% at 80. Or they could do 10% of their units at 60% of AMI, but in either scenario, they got a 20% bonus density, with the expectation that it being that most of the projects in Tyson's were going to be high rise, where the building code restrictions didn't limit their ability to recoup the bonus density. My question is, these numbers seem to be even higher than Tyson's that you're showing here. And I guess why is that, and how did your analysis prove that it was more affordable to do it in Reston than it was in Tyson's?
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. I'm going to look to Mel in particular on the numbers. We didn't look at it in terms of Reston versus Tyson's. When we were looking at this, this is looking at a new poll of data from CoStar. So Mel, do you want to describe kind of the exchange and the analysis and the data that went into this? Because I hear what you're saying, Mark, and Mark's correct in terms of the new commitment levels for Tyson's. But I don't believe that we looked at it in terms of a comparison between Reston and Tyson's. But your point is correct.
And this has come up a couple of times in different contexts of our analysis. And so I want to ask Abdi to join this conversation a little bit too, because depending on how you craft the policy, you may choose to accept fewer or different kinds of WDUs in order to craft a workable policy. And so, for instance, if you look at the difference between the number of WDUs you get if you do the 1-1-2 ratio versus if you just try to maximize, it gets a little bit different. I'm sorry, can you go back, Graham? So if you compare the bottom two columns here, right? If our preference were to retain the 1-1-2 policy so that everybody is clear on what is required and it's not that different from place to place, then you're actually requiring fewer units than you could. And I think that that's part of what happened with Tyson's and with the countywide is there was preference for crafting policy that was easily understood and well that people were accustomed to. But in addition, one thing I want to point out that I think also came into consideration in the county-wide scenario, as well as Tyson's, is that this analysis over time goes bad, if you will. Right now, we're looking at data, but we anticipate that costs of construction are going up. We anticipate that this density bonus becomes less economically persuasive over time. And so there is consideration to be made that if you require fewer units, your policy encourages WDUs to be created for a longer period of time without revision.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is that you, rather than establish a policy that might be perfect for the market today, but be outdated tomorrow, you pick a policy that might be underwhelming today, but more appropriate in the future because it's sustainable for a longer period of time without revision.
Well, that's part of it, but also just kind of going from Tammy's perspective, if you give the developers a better deal and they are able to realize that deal, as you say, Mark, then you get more WDUs, right? Because we're building more and we're getting the same percentage. So it's about economic persuasion, and it's about people understanding the policy, right? Because if you don't understand a policy very well, if it's not very clearly applied, then fewer people are going to participate in it. I mean, developers are going to participate in it. And then like you said, just having to revisit it over and over again. So the countywide policy, we got there as a task force, right? Or you guys got there as a task force. And so there were lots of considerations from all different perspectives about the final decision. But the numbers looked very similar that I provided at that task force.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is Abby. The only thing I want to, I mean, I think Graham and Mel captured it correctly. The same approach and methodology is used when when staff was supporting in Virginia Center for Virginia Tech was supporting us for the countywide in Tyson's. I think the only difference is the data, right, Mel? As far as we're looking at what you pull from CoStar or
correct.
rents.
So the rents pulled from CoStar also in April, which we had feedback that April rents include some of the fewest concessions, so they're very reflective of what people actually pay. So we updated the rents, and then we also updated the construction costs.
Yeah, Mark, did you want to wrap up, because we do need to move on?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll say, Walter, is that I'm cognizant of the fact that there are competitive issues between Tyson's and Reston or Herndon in terms of where investment dollars go, and these things matter. And there's always a recognition that Tyson's was different than other places. I'm just worried about going beyond Tyson's, 4 months after the prior approvals were granted, before the countywide policy and the Tyson's policies were updated. It hasn't been that long. If it were 3 or 4 years since those policies were updated, then, it'd be one thing. But we're 3 or 4 months from when that was implemented, and yet we're overshooting both Tyson's and the countywide by fairly significant numbers. It's just an observation.
Thank you, Mark. Let's go to John Mooney, and then David Vanell. I'm going to go to you and have you put your thoughts on the table. But John Mooney, go ahead.
Say, Walter, should I get in here before David, if it's possible?
Oh,
John
yes.
Carter. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so John Mooney first, and then John Carter.
Thank you, Walter. My question is, when the stratification of affordability levels was changed by the Board of Supervisors in early 2021, was there any change in or discussion of change in the term of the commitment to WDUs or ADUs. So it gets to Mark's point. Did the commitment become longer in duration, or is there discussion of that?
It didn't change as a part of the countywide policy, but Abby, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the same exact thing. The only thing that was, Mr. Mooney, that was changed was the total commitment, percentage commitment, and the income tiers that are served. Everything else has remained the same for the affordability period. So that did not change as part of the plan amendment.
Has there
And
been?
keep in mind, the only thing that the board changed was WDU for rent. It did not touch for sale WDUs, and ADUs were never authorized to be looked at. So it was just a WDU rental that was adjusted.
So you're saying that it was always 50 years? 50-year term?
So this is Abdi from Housing. What we're saying, to answer Mr. Mooney's question, the board's authorization that happened in February of 2021 for the WDU policy was only for the rental component, and it changed the two primary areas that were changed were the total percentage committed. It went from 12 to 8% countywide, and then the income tier served, it went from 80, 100, 120 to 60, 70, 80%.
John, was that your question? Or was it the term of the contract for the unit?
It's the term of the contract, and I asked whether that was changed or whether the change was discussed.
It's always been 50 years, or it's not
Yeah,
now 50 years?
The control period has always been 50 years for WDUs.
Yes, and for WDUs, yes, correct. It's always been 50 years and it still remains 50 years.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and John, just to add to that, I would point out that Tammy, even though what you said about, this new policy being too generous, the development community still opposed it.
Oh, I understand that. I just want to point out that Montgomery County is a 12.5% commitment on anything that's a 50 unit or more project, and the term and the AMI is 65%, no negotiation, and the term is 99 years. So I've gone through and looked at the term, and I have charts that go from 30 to 10 to 30, and then I was told it's now 50. So some of those charts that were on the county website are wrong, because that's where I got my information. I didn't make it up. But anyway, that's Montgomery County, a very comparable jurisdiction, very close, and the developers are exactly the same companies with exactly the same, in some cases, people at the negotiating table, except they have a different, you can do more there, but you can't do less, and it's 99-year term per, and their accumulation of WDU and AD, well, 65 is ADU, term is way bigger, way bigger than Fairfax County.
Yeah, Tammy, you make some good points. Did you know that Fairfax County and the program that Mark referred to that was thrown out of court actually did their program first? Fairfax County started with the moderately priced dwelling unit program. Montgomery County started afterwards.
Yeah, but they've been doing it.
Fairfax County lost about 15 years because of the court case.
I'll get that, but Montgomery's been doing this for 50 years.
Yeah, I know. Right, right. And Fairfax County picked it up when the General Assembly came back in '89, I think, and let us do it again, but in a more limited way. So, good points, Tammy.
John, this is Abby. I just want to add one clarifier, just so that, just on the record to be clear. When I was referring to the control period, it's for the WDU rental program. It's always been 50 years and it remains as 50. The affordable dwelling unit throughout its history,
it's gone up and down.
It has changed, yeah. So it's 30 years now as far as the rental side, 30 years on the ADUs and 50 years on the WDUs. I just wanted that as a clarifier. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Abdi.
Thank you, Abdi.
Yes, John Mooney, did you have anything else?
I do not. Thank you very much.
John Carter, take it away, and where do we go?
I'll be brief. So what I'd like to do is kind of set up a decision tree, perhaps maybe this will move this along. First decision is one, does the existing comp plan still apply? And the existing comp plan has the chart in it that says as you go up in density, you go up in WD. So that's the first thing to decide. You want to go with the chart. It doesn't have the tiers in it. The second thing is during the last 3 years anyway, the WDUs, and we're not talking about ADUs, that's off the table at least for what I'm talking about here. It has been, as you said earlier, it has been 80, 100, and 120. But the Board of Supervisors during the last 3 years has approved not all, but most projects at the 70, 80, and 90 or 100 range for WDUs. So that's what we have. There's thousands of units or thousands of housing units approved at the 70, 80, and 90. And the reason for that is one, the 100 and 120 that just never worked. But the second reason is Reston was supposed to be do a little bit better. And it was possible to do a little bit better in Reston because of where we fit in the economic aspects of it. Other areas are a little more challenged than Reston. So now the second decision point, remember that this is only a policy. This is not law. And if you see the chart in front of you, you know, this was discussed a lot at the Planning Commission, an awful lot by me. Now you see what people concentrate on is the 8%. But if you see the note below that is meant as the floor, not the range. You have a range of approvals that you can provide, giving the 8% as one of the guides, but you can go up to the 20% in terms of the bonus density if you have a corresponding bonus. Now that's from the General Assembly, and there are a few counties that are allowed to do that. Fairfax is one, Arlington is another, Alexandria is another, Loudoun is another, and I think there's some around Richmond and maybe one or two down there at Norfolk. So we have some support from the General Assembly to approach this the way we're doing it. So again, it's a policy. It is not the law. And I guess what the Board of Supervisors has allowed us to do is to negotiate. Almost every one of them is separate. I don't like to do that on the Planning Commission, but I recognize that this is a policy. This is the way the Board of Supervisors has set it up. And we should do that. We should continue to negotiate. But that's up to the task force, I guess, to decide. Now, what happens if we went with the new policy, but in Reston, we have thousands of units approved at the lower levels? What happens to those approvals? Do they come back and amend? That could be quite a lot of effort. So I think that's a decision point. And one of the reasons why to be careful of the countywide, in addition to the countywide, doesn't apply everywhere. It doesn't apply to Tyson's, doesn't apply to Huntington, doesn't apply to Annandale. They also have their own restrictions. The last thing I want to say, you know, this is a lot about WDUs, but this section in the new Reston comp plan should have more than just the WDUs. There are more things that we can do. One, in the village centers and in all the multifamily, we have either brought the density in line with the scale of these things. And in the multifamily, we haven't increased density anywhere. That is an approach that would say we're preserving the existing multifamily, which is extremely important. It's not just about the WDUs and the new, it's developing our land use policies that will help preserve the existing housing. And if you remember in our land use discussion, we had, I believe it's Vantage Hill that came in, and they have a little bit of extra land, which there's former pool, and they wanted to add some housing units. If we stick with what we have said in our land use meetings, that would be an approach to support affordable housing. Then the third approach is we have county-owned land, and this is where the county actually builds the affordable housing. The county, this county, Fairfax County, does a fantastic job, I think, in building affordable housing. Even though I would prefer it to be more inclusionary in our WDU process, the county does a very good job in that. So anyway, just my point here is we have some decisions to make. Does the chart apply? What income levels do we want? And do we overturn what we have been doing in the last 3 years anyway and do something new? Or do we try to work out something now that's as equitable as possibly can be? So anyway, I hope that's helpful, Walter, and all the other people on the task force.
I think so, John. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I know David Bunnell. David, you've been working on this a lot too, and can I just say, I know we're running, it's 8:41 right now, but this is complicated stuff. And
yes,
I
it is.
really appreciate everybody jumping into this, with both feet. So David, go right ahead. Give us your thoughts.
Well, thank you, sir. Based upon the recent 10, 15 minutes of conversation, I think what I'd like to do is stay with this chart and stay with some of the things that have been said. And then I'll flip back to kind of giving you a quick overview of how I see, at least how I see this thing unfolding. First of all, if I could ask Mel, you mentioned that over time, the data turns to mush on what you've calculated here. Can you tell us what over time means? Is it 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 2 years from now? What's your,
I
what do you
generally
project out?
get it revisited at least every 5 years. If you can't stand to do it, it must be revisited every 10 years. But generally, and particularly of late, the increase, well, okay, let's say over the past 10 years, the increase in construction costs has been sort of astronomical. And it's that increase that's causing these to go to mush, if you will. So 5 years is advisable to revisit.
So in 5 years, then what you're saying is in 5 years, redoing your calculations based upon the then most current resources. I mean, is there a percentage off that our current data would be, or can you not calculate that?
No, I can't calculate that. I mean, I could calculate maybe a ballpark sort of change. But, generally when we're at the margins, we say go with a lower commitment because it'll add longevity and persuasiveness to your policy.
Okay, thank you. So the chart that I put together, and John Carter and I have had a couple of exchanges over the last couple of days. The chart that I put together in my document, and I'm sorry, I should have probably sent the document to the staff folks, Graham and others, because I did speak with Graham about it before I started putting this all together. The chart that I developed, I promise you, I wasn't stealing Mel's information because I hadn't seen it. And what I did was I basically took a look at the countywide policy, and I took a look at the old countywide policy and the new one, and the old Tyson's policy and the new one. And under the assumption that we're just as special as Tyson's in Reston, only in a different way, I fell upon what I fell upon, which was 4% at 60, 4% at 80, 60, 4% 60, 4% 70, 4% 80, for a total of 12, as opposed to the current countywide of 8. And I think that's where we ought to be, but I'm not a statistician, and this is my first experience trying to deal with the numbers in housing issues, affordable housing and workforce housing, as anybody from P&Z, who's on here, knows has been an issue for a long time, and issue for several of us, you know, every developer we get to talk to. So I think that's probably the place to be at this point. There may be some interest in, if there is interest, and I'm sure there is, if there is interest in bonus density calculations. I placed that bonus density calculation for meeting those standards by developers at 4 and 4 and 4, which I think is frankly what John uses in his calculations as well. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. The bonus density I selected was 16%, and I know from talking with people that sometimes developers have a difficult time reaching for that extra density, because of the building construction restrictions and things like that. But so I'm not sure. I know that what I proposed at 16% isn't what the current plan proposes at 20, but I thought that was a place that highlighted the differences and maybe eccentricities of Reston, and yet set itself apart from the the newest county standard. So if anybody wants to weigh in on that chart, that's great. If not, I can just go back and kind of give you an outline of of what I would like to make sure we have in the comprehensive plan to address ADUs and WDUs.
So David, thank you. And I know we're running a little bit late, but I'd be interested, does anyone have any thoughts, another direction or some variation to what David, any darts to throw at what David's put out there? Let's get that one.
I'm sure there must be some.
I'd like to, this is Tammy, I'd like to discuss this next time. We are so far behind on our schedule.
Yeah, so
thanks
move it
to
along.
David for the work he's done. Thank you.
Sure, yeah, we'll definitely do that, Tammy. We'll put it on the next, next meeting. Tammy, do you have any immediate thoughts right now, or just trying to sort it out?
Just a quick comment from John Carter that,
Yeah, please.
this is a policy. So this, whatever you set should be you should be expressed in terms of a range, just the way the county has done it. And so, give some wiggle room in terms of the policy to get more aggressive, of course, if that's appropriate. And then you've got to address the chart, whether you're just eliminating the chart or not. As the density goes up, do the WDUs go up?
Right. Okay, thank you, John. And Lynn, I see your comment in the chat.
I just think that what I'm hearing in the conversation, it sounds that Tyson's is an ideal that we should be aspiring to, and I'm sorry. I think that Reston is the ideal that the rest of the county should be aspiring to.
There you go.
All right, thank you, Lynn. Any other last thoughts? Obviously, this needs to come back, for more discussion. But other thoughts? Okay. All right. Well, listen. Thank you. I appreciate everybody really jumping into this and your patience. I know this takes a while to get up to speed and for everybody to get through the jargon, but I think good discussion tonight. So. Any final comments or questions before we move on from housing, because it will be coming back?
Just an urge to have everybody who wants to put something in writing and send it to me, and I will do my best to include it in another draft that I will work up and send out.
Wonderful. David, thank you. Thank you for taking this on. Okay. Next, and let's see if we can get through the next two things quickly, if possible. Gary, you have economic development, and I apologize for only leaving you a few minutes here.
Yes. Jose, can you call up my chapter?
Yeah.
Screen?
Yeah, just give me one moment. I just need to get presenter role.
And I'll just say that in the last version of it, Charles Kapur and I have worked on this, and it's been coordinated with the equity section with Michelle Kimmel, with John Carter, and tried to seek out others in terms of looking at this. And what it is a chapter that stays in sync with the county in terms of the policy plan with its Department of Economic Initiatives and the Economic Development Authority. So it's a Reston focused economic development chapter that tries to really emphasize Reston. And it starts off with, as you can see, the principal vision and an introduction, and then kind of goes to overall overarching strategies. And I'm shortening this up to move along here, but looking at what are the big things that Reston needs to think about, and what is, it's done to put it in position of being a first-class place to do business and stay in business and go to the future as businesses change. And Charles, please chime in anywhere you want to. So if you go through the overall strategies, you'll see the business climate, our community livability, planning infrastructure, and education. These are all important things that make a difference in businesses doing business here, as well as overall in the community. The other thing was to think about, how this works in other plans and in conjunction with how we're approaching the writing of this plan overall. So you'll see, the overall Reston focus, and then it goes to policies that make a difference. And there's 7 of these. Key thing is, besides looking forward all the time, emphasizing what's important today, is connecting with the equity section, our Fairfax One policy, making this a desirable community for all. So it does all the things you would expect: attract new high value ones, attract new and nurture existing small businesses. We need to keep the businesses here. We need to attract new ones, and we need to think about things that will keep them in certain places in Reston. And that's what this does. After you go through the policies, and I'm moving along pretty fast here, go to the specific recommendations, and you'll see those. They're also tracked, as I mentioned, to the policy plan, to Reston things in particular that you will see in here. And then I think Michelle Kimmel brought this up. Let's, create some excitement in Reston by, moving along and doing things like having a Reston website, or even newer technologies for people to think about Reston for a place to do business as well as to live in Reston. And even if you're here, to find your way around Reston, in addition to the RA website, which is obviously very, very helpful. And it talks about, groups here in Reston working together, and the Chamber of Commerce and minority chambers of commerce as well, and things that we need to make a difference in Reston, attracting a new university school here. And it just cites things that will help on all levels of employees in Reston, as well as the business themselves, apprenticeship programs, and those kind of things. And as I said, connecting to individual areas in Reston. So that's what this all does, in conjunction with me trying to keep it down to a limited number of pages. It's at 6 pages, which I'm happy with at the moment. And where we're taking the chapters. So with that, you can, as I said in my email or on this to you all, you can call me. Please submit anything you want. And Charles, would you like to add anything to all that? Charles got the statistics for this and he worked on this. So Charles, let me turn it over to you for the questions.
Sure. Thank you, Gary. Yeah, I think one of the things that we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, that the whole design of this section is to just put out there for people to see that Reston is a community that is ready for economic growth. It goes a long way in espousing the amenities that we have that organizations will want to see from our infrastructure, and most importantly, our workforce. And then the policies and the strategies are really designed to, as Gary mentioned, support and nurture the businesses we have, attract the high value businesses we want, and provide opportunities for development for the folks that are here that are highly educated, highly capable folks, to put them in the best position to be successful. A lot of the ideas and strategies that Gary itemized, there's different varying elements of them already in place to some degree or another. There's certain things that the Chamber of Commerce is already doing. And so to the extent that there's an opportunity to just grow those initiatives, develop them even further in a strategic way, would be very exciting for the future of economic development here.
Wow, fantastic. Well, thank you, Charles, and Gary. Thank you for pulling this together. This is very impressive. There really wasn't a standalone section. There's not one in the current comprehensive plan, so I think you had to pull from a lot of different places to make this happen. So, thank you, Gary. Are there questions? Tammy, do I see your hand up, or is that a previous hand?
Apologize, a previous hand, and I like this chapter. Is well done.
All right, thank you. Questions? Anyone else
John
have
Carter.
questions, comments?
This is John Carter. I'd like to say a couple things if possible. I'll be very brief. One, these are hard to write. These they often sort of deviate into sort of boosterism rather than really saying much useful. I think this one departs from that and is got a lot of strong points. And I think it's a challenge to the rest of the task force to make sure our chapters can address some of the issues. And I'll just talk about balance for a second. It's not just about the high income industries, the tech industries, the defense industries, but also the service industries, the auto repair, the carpenters, the plumbers, the startups. It's not just about high incomes, it's about a range of incomes. And this one provides a really good balance, I think, between those. It mentions both kinds of industries and the kinds of things that we need in Reston. It also talks about equity, which I think is a switch and something new that you see in some comp plans, but it's very early in the sort of the comp plan preparation. So I'd like to say that it talks about education. And it doesn't refer directly to WD policy, but it's about those people that live in the WDUs and being able to find a place to work and rest in as well. So I think this is a good chapter, and I think it represents a challenge to the rest of the people that are writing chapters to address some of the issues in here. So great job, Gary, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, John.
All right.
Charles too.
I'm just riding your coattails, Gary.
Any other comments, questions? All right, Gary, Charles, thank you again. Let's do. I would say give everybody at least a week or so. If they're in reading through it, if anybody has other thoughts or suggestions, additions, let Gary know. And Gary, you'll take it from there, right?
Correct. Thank you.
Okay. Fantastic. All right. Well, great work. I wish they were all that easy, but you know, that's why this, that's why we're all here. All right. Thank you again. Let's go on to the last item on the agenda. Jose, can you put up the agenda? It's the Reston Town Center North, but I want to make a very important distinction. We still have, not tonight, this will be the next task force meeting, a discussion of density and use issues for Reston Town Center North, both for the future Innova part and for the county part. But tonight is just the site layout. And the reason for that is basically to try to coordinate this with the site layout, the updated site layout, which is going to the Design Review Board later this month as well. So DRB is just going to see the updated design layout. And Jose, is Joan here to talk to the layout, or to at least maybe actually, Jose, yeah, I should probably ask you to just put that on the screen.
Joan is here. I'm happy to dig up the slides and put it up on the screen. Give me one moment.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
here. Hello.
Yeah, Joan, did I say that right?
You did, yes. And I can share the plan, or if Jose's got it.
No, I'll pass the baton right over. No worries.
Okay.
So yeah, I know we're going to have more discussion on use and density for Reston Town Center North next meeting. But today, what I'd really like to do is to get any feedback on the site layout, basically the different road structure, and this is very different, obviously, from what's currently in the comprehensive plan. It's evolved quite a bit from that. So, yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So last week we talked about this evolution, and today we're basically confirming agreement that we're going to submit this amendment to the approved plan that we have now. And I'm just going to go to a little bit bigger. So we're basically just talking about this layout. And again, the changes were Barron Cameron, rather than being a diagonal street, will now go directly across, so that our central green can be quite a bit larger. Rather than 2.3 acres, we're at 3.5. And that's it's a relatively simple change. We are still at concepts, but this will allow us to start our zoning application.
And Joan, there is, I believe, one other change, which is, what is it, Street A, between the Central Green or Civic Green, whatever we're going to call it. And yeah, that, Joan,
You're right.
Can you address that real quick?
Yes. So this will not be a public street. It will be a private street made of pavers.
Yeah, and the idea there is that at various times it'd be possible to basically open up that Central Green Park area in the playing field and the rec center right there, and have that be one big connected space. Any questions or comments on the layout?
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Dennis, go on ahead, and then Jan.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Sort of a minor and a major question and concern. The minor one come up before is the property that Norton Scott owns, and I don't know how you do a proposal for a grid of streets with a major component unresolved, unless perhaps there is a resolution that's out there we're just not aware of yet. So that's the minor one. The major one is, again, going back to form follows function. I would have hoped we could have the discussion of what we want to see into these areas because I think that's going to impact on what makes sense as far as having a grid of streets to get to all these places. I know next week we'll have a longer discussion, and I've certainly got some thoughts and a couple proposals, recommendations on that. But right now, I'm just a little concerned if we lock it into streets and then we find out that it would be better to shift the park or do this or do that or what goes there. We're locked out of being able to make a good change.
All right, thank you, Dennis. Yeah, and I think, I mean, the design that we're working from is the DRB approved design. So that's kind of the starting point from here. But yeah, I would hope there would be some flexibility, Dennis. You make a good point. Jan?
Yes, okay. I'm concerned about parking. Will there be enough of it? Where will it be?
Yeah, I think when we talk about the use and the density, I think parking will go along with that next week.
Okay, that's great.
Yep. And Jan, you had asked as well. I believe these slides were distributed to the task force, so you should have these somewhere.
I just resent it to the task force just now.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
For easier access.
Thanks.
Mr. Mooney, I see, has his hand up.
Thank you, Walter. Joan, I'm wondering whether you all are prepared to discuss where you propose to put the 2,400 plus multifamily units in this layout.
In a very general way, we are, yes.
Can you share that with us?
Sure. So the 2,460 dwelling units that we talked about include not only this property, but also the Redevelopment Housing Authority property. So I have this little, here we go here. So the Redevelopment Housing Authority would have approximately, and when I say they would have it, I'm basically saying they would have the approved right to have this maximum. It's not necessarily that they have a plan to build this amount. It's the approval. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. I guess I should say it's the current approved density, and when each block comes in, the actual density or the actual amount of office space or dwelling units could be substantially less. But essentially, Inova would be building 1,050. The county would be 1,280, and the Redevelopment Housing Authority would be 130, for a total of 2,460.
Okay, and
that's basically 49.2 acres times 50 dwelling units an acre.
Multiplication. Well, we'll save it for next week, but we clearly have some comments on all of that.
Yeah.
And what block? Where is this Redevelopment Housing Authority? Is that block 9 that you're talking about, where the cottages are?
Yes.
All right, other questions or comments?
I have a question, please.
Oh, yes, Tammy.
Could you go back to the slide where you show that pink road cutting across the park? Okay, it's in the lower corner of this. Is that for real? I mean, seriously, we're going to divide our fabulous park that we've worked so hard to get additional acreages with a public road that's
No,
a cut
Tammy,
road?
this is actually trying to show the change.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
Good.
originally we did have a diagonal road.
Okay.
And now we're going straight across. So the pink is to show a change.
Okay, so right now, the pink on the top of this concept comparison is what you're planning?
Correct.
Okay.
So it looks like this.
Okay, great. Thank you. I was freaking. I thought you were putting a road across Walters Park. I thought he's gonna murder you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Oh, all right. Other comments or questions on the layout?
Just I like the layout, but I don't like the idea of adding 2,460,000 dwelling units to it. It sort of takes away from the ambiance of a park. That's my only comment. Feels
All right, Jan.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Save that thought for next week too. Tammy.
One more comment. This is a going before DRB, and I'm with Dennis completely. Until we talk next week about form and function and what goes where and density, which is going to be a long conversation. So let's not leave it to the last. I want to know, this is going before DRB for concept only for the site plan, correct? There can be tweaks to this.
For the concept plan, we're not at site plan. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
I would just
other questions, John?
I would just point out from my experience with the DRB before that their approval of a concept plan does not mean approval of a plan in concept. It means a solid approval of this concept, and they are loath to change such approvals.
Yeah, John, that's a good point. And frankly, the only change from what DRB approved, a year and a half ago, is the larger central green and that road that now will open up the whole park area. So, yeah, that's right. And I think that shows the I guess the sensitivity DRB has to changes, for better or worse. All right, other comments, questions? Okay, well, thank you again. We'll be having a much more thorough discussion, density, use, parking, other things like that next week. I've heard from several of you already about concerns around that. I would say keep the conversation going. Let's see if we could have any draft language, maybe multiple versions is okay for next week. And again, the idea is to update what's currently in the comprehensive plan, which among other things talks about a minimum of 1,000 units for this area. So everyone be thinking about that. Okay, anything else on Reston Town Center North? Okay. Hey, any final issues before the task force tonight? We're 14 minutes over, but that's not bad. I started 10 minutes late.
I just saw Walter, a comment from Jennifer on tree save.
Yes. Yeah, it is definitely
chat.
open space. I mean, at least technically, I'm not sure. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, Reston Association will have other questions, no doubt, but this is not the time to bring them up.
Okay. Okay. All right. Anything else? Understood, Jennifer. Very much so. Thank you for participating. like this. Okay. Anything else before we adjourn for this evening? Okay, thanks everybody. Let's keep going. I think we're making progress. Everyone have a good rest of your evening.